Hello, hello, beautiful and amazing people. Welcome to another Topic Tuesday. My guest star today is Des M. Astor, author of surprisingly quite a wonderful book series. And I only say surprisingly because I look at this cover and what I expect is not what I'm getting. I'm getting something a little bit of mix of fantasy, a little bit of sci-fi, a lot of snakes, a lot of coolness. I'm definitely loving the book series so far. We're going to be talking about the alt-right, Norse paganism, and why a lot more pagans need to step up, lay some more curses on people, and we need to sow some fucking chaos. Des, I'll give you a moment to introduce yourself if you'd like.
Yes, hi. Like she said, Des a Master, and it's a play on my name Desiree. It's for disaster. And yep, I'm an author. I also blog now, and I usually don't write complex topics like this, but I felt the need to write it because I feel like we need to speak up more about it. Those of us that are into Norse paganism and have that background. So I felt it was important to speak up. And otherwise, yeah, I'm gothic and such like that, and I collect plushies.
Hell yeah. So, I am going to be dropping her social media links down in the description below if you're watching this on YouTube. They're going to go in the self-promotion tab of Tran, or if you're watching this on podcast way in the future, do we have food in pill form yet? Are pills in food form yet? If not, what the fuck? Um, okay. So, Des, uh, and also some background knowledge for everyone else that happens to be watching or does catch this. Um, One reason I wanted to reach out to you and talk about this topic is I actually used to be a Nazi. I'm not gonna say alt-right, I'm not gonna say neo-Nazi, legit fucking Nazi. Like disgusting anti-Jewish beliefs, pro-white stuff, Aryan race bullshit, the whole nine yards. Um, so I just wanted to talk to you a bit about what the fuck is going on with the alt-right, why they keep trying to reclaim paganism in their really fucked up ways, and what we can do about that.
Yeah.
So, first up, I guess what I want to ask is why do you think the alt-right keeps insisting on trying to claim things like Norse paganism and other pagan traditions for their own?
Well, it's really ironic because, and then this is a word that I can't pronounce very well, so I
Hmm.
apologize. Evangelicals. A lot of it is evangelicals trying to pretend that they're polytheistic, but they're not.
Hmm.
They just pick and choose what parts of pagan traditions they would like to select, and on the off chance that like the 1% truly are pagans, then there is that. But a lot of it's intriguing because it's twisted by history.
Hmm.
Um, Christianity and Christians twisted Vikings, the Nordic people. They're not really called Vikings, they're called the Norse, but it's easier to say Vikings because it's what people know.
Hmm.
Um, they were twisted into very brutish, terrible, evil people. And they did do, and there is no excuses. They did do some terrible things, like every culture and stuff. And they're not like I said in the article, they're not like a cup of tea. A lot of things that they did were horrible,
Hmm.
but there's a lot of wrong in there too. Like, they did conquer, but they assimilated with a lot of cultures or brought them in as opposed to just completely brutalizing them. Um, so that was one key point. And then the other thing is there is a myth that they are all blonde-haired, blue-eyed, people like that. But even without any research though, like common sense will tell you that can't be true because Vikings are pirates and they
Right.
would travel all over the world. So in traveling all over the world, you wouldn't just be completely white and you wouldn't have just the same hair color or eye color either. So they've got this notion, and I actually had an argument on Twitter the other day. Yeah, the Twitter arguments, lovely. With someone who
Hmm.
actually had that viewpoint. I got pissed off. I have anger issues, so I had to leave the conversation. But
Same.
I tried to explain to them, and like I remember quote retweeting them, and they're like, "Okay, we can agree to disagree." And I'm like, "Okay, so we can agree to disagree on facts." Because they come into my article like, well, as long as I cast correctly, like Achilles or something has to be white, blah blah blah. And I'm like,
No.
sure, but that means that Jesus should therefore be have
Right.
far darker skin and not be white, right?
But
So
of
then
course,
they get
none of
into
them
this
are gonna
argument
make
on that one.
Jesus, non-white.
Exactly. So then this goes into a further argument, and then I'm like, "Whoa, wait, what does this have to do with my article anyway?" And then, of course, they reveal, "Well, you're trying to change history, blah, blah, blah," and I'm just like, "Oh
No.
my god." So that's a perfect example of why they're doing this. They have this image of Nordic, culture and stuff that is completely the opposite of what Nordic culture really was
Mhm.
because of how they've been painted in history.
Right. Okay. Um, so with that being said, with that being said, something I'd like to broach on a bit. Back whenever I was a Nazi and being raised in the alt-right, because it was something that was raised into me by my grandfather, there was this thing that I realized over time, especially once I started to get out of the mindset, how anything at all that seems to be even slightly good had to somehow tie back to us and our beliefs and stuff like that. And anything that was even slightly bad had to be everyone else. It could not be us, no matter what level of mental gymnastics I or my grandparents or whoever else had to do. It simply couldn't wrap back to us.
Mhm.
And in addition to that, there is this weird thing where, like, if something even started to slightly wrap back to us that was in a negative light whatsoever, then it always was taken out of context, or it was always a fake, or something that was
I see
rewritten,
that
or
a lot,
yeah,
yeah. That's something I see a ton. Someone will defend it with either out of context or fake. Yep.
right. And I'd like to go ahead and apologize to my viewers about the green flashes that happen from
Yeah,
time to
sorry about
time.
that.
We tried to fix it, but I decided that it's not that big of a deal, and this is a topic that needs to be broached, so yeah. But yeah, I have my own ideas for why that is, but I'm actually very curious to hear why you think that, old Nazi me and, the alt-right people that I grew up around and other alt-right people do that.
Um, I would say probably because they being, like, wrong hurts, like, no one wants to be wrong. We all want to be correct, like, and I've had that mindset too at a much far, far lesser scale, granted, but, um and you'll get into arguments with people who have different views and such, and you'll feel like you're backed into a corner and you're being blamed.
Mhm.
And then you'll probably feel like you're going to get in trouble for it. And a lot of like what you said with upbringing and stuff.
Mhm.
Um, and then were you like punished at all for questioning anything,
Oh,
or were you heavily
absolutely.
punished? Right. So see, um, you start like your people are afraid of punishment and
Mhm.
emotional abuse and mental abuse and all of that really like really really hurt. They will change you and they will like be terrible. So then you have that fear of punishment and someone like blaming you for stuff, and then you have the fear of a bunch of people dogpiling and bullying. And
Mhm.
humans are a very social species. So we do rely on our groups. So
Right.
we don't want to be targeted and then like ripped out of our group, singled out, and then bombarded and when we think that we're correct. So like there's that like sort of defense mechanism thing going on there,
Mhm.
and that's probably why some people are just so unable to choose their beliefs no matter or change their beliefs, sorry, no matter how utterly hateful, which is really disappointing and sad, and, like, I have had and somewhat had this, mentality that people like that can't change, but, of course, I'm proved wrong in this case, so there is that. So there is hope and people can change,
Right.
but it's hard from what I've seen.
Uh, I will say that it has been very difficult. I still
Mhm,
have very often those racist and problematic ideas that was raised into me pop up into my head.
mhm,
But through extensive therapy, through analysis, through learning actual psychology and whatnot, through being in the medical profession, um, I've got to the point where I can, whenever I get a thought like that, I take a step back, analyze it, and I break it down to its core components and figure out why I had that thought, all this
mhm,
other stuff, the illogicalness of it. And I think what really helped me get out of the alt right mindset was that I stopped. viewing it as a competition between me and everyone else where there's only so
Mhm.
many resources and I have to come out on top or else everything is lost. And in
Mhm.
addition to that, I stopped punishing myself for not knowing something. Because you're right, there is a lot of punishment for those that are raised alt-right. I grew up in a town where race and sexuality were very much not something discussed. We had one black kid at the school, and he was constantly mistreated, and no one would stand up to him. And I am responsible for some of that. I did also antagonize him, and he deserves way better.
Yeah.
Jerry, if you happen to be watching this, thank you for kicking my ass that time on the bus. You helped me out a lot, my dude. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, there is a lot of punishment there. Like, I
That makes sense.
remember just bringing up the topic of, like, "Oh, what if gay people aren't really all that bad?"
Mhm.
And the teacher that I asked that to started to drill into me, "No, the evil homosexuals are all pedophiles, and you can't go near them, and they're all evil, and blah, blah, blah," and it was really terrible. And these
Yeah.
are things that are put into the minds of our kids. And I'm lucky that I got to the point where I was able to stop being afraid of being wrong, and I started learning that it was okay to question.
Yeah.
And I think that's
That's good.
something that we really need to put pressure on for those of us that choose to have kids is it's okay for your kids to ask questions. They should ask questions. I get being
Mhm.
frustrated that you don't have all the answers, but you
Exactly.
need to encourage those critical thinking skills.
Exactly. And not, like, getting angry at someone for asking the questions either. But how do we even drill that into their parents? Because a lot of us understand that, but the problem is a lot of these hateful people are in the older generations, and,
Right.
and they're raising the kid with there's, like, no access to any of that, and, of course, when you try to teach children the real reality, the parents will nail them
Right.
and just be terrible.
It really is. So one of my viewers just sent in, um, and thank you, Gwen, for sending this in. So her anecdotal observation, or my apologies, Gwen, their anecdotal observation is that from what they've seen, people are more likely to change when they meet people that they're supposed to hate. Because it's a lot harder to hate someone to their face than it is, separated.
That is so
Um,
true, yeah, and that's why cities tend to be more blue, liberal,
mhm,
slash left. Well, left is very different. Yeah, progressive is the proper term for all of this. Progressive cities seem to be very progressive because you have a giant mixture of people.
right. I agree. My coming out of the alt-right definitely happened a lot more once I started hanging out with a group of queer kids that I didn't know were queer until having really well-established bonds with them
Mhm,
than any other time of my life. Because that's whenever I suddenly got hit with the realization of, "Oh, crap, everything I believed is wrong. These kids aren't pedophiles. These kids aren't evil corruptors. They're just
mhm.
fucking kids,
Yeah, exactly.
just like me."
Mhm,
Um, so something else I wanted to bring up, it's doesn't seem to be just Norse paganism that gets co-opted a lot by the alt-right. It seems to be, ow, any and all paganism
right.
that puts masculinity above all other things, and
Yeah,
especially anything that's been touched by colonialization.
yeah,
Like,
and that's actually not even in the like, masculinity isn't as important in the Norse as
mhm,
people think,
exactly,
and it's because, again, of these notions. Yeah,
right,
it's terrible.
right. Like, I took my name from a freaking Valkyrie who was a very well-renowned warrior. She challenged Odin to a fight, and
Mhm.
Odin backed down.
Yeah, and
Like,
no one challenges Freya. She will
right?
kill you. She'll
Exactly. Um, but yeah, there seems to be a lot of things where the alt-right want to take anything that supports their side, put this gloss
Mhm,
over it about, "Look at how good it is. Look at how amazing it is." And they just so happen to support everything we believe. So we may not be that great, but look at how good
mhm.
we could be. And I saw this happen greatly with the MAGA crowd because it's the exact same mindset of make America great.
Mhm,
Because it's like, when was America great? And what do you mean by make it great again? When was it great? How are we doing that? Aren't we already on our way to doing that? Why are you trying to prevent that?
Mhm.
stuff like that. And there seems to be a lot of dissonance between what they actually believe and everything else going on in reality.
Yeah, and that's very true, yeah. They're probably talking about the 1950s where, like, no one was safe aside from white men,
Right.
cis white men,
And
cis
cis white
straight white
men
men.
could, right, and cis straight white men could get away with literally anything they wanted
Oh,
to.
yeah. Yep.
No.
Absolutely terrible. Like, I see people glorifying the old times all the
Mhm.
time. And again, this is why I'm not a giant fan of, like, historical fantasy or
Right.
anything or medieval, like and I could rant all day about medieval stuff, but that's prominent in fantasy. And
Right.
yes, I know a ton of people love medieval stuff, and it's understandable, but, like, really think about it and what happened during those ages. Why is all of this glorified? Because
Mhm.
anything that was in the past, doesn't have the technology we do, so anyone who is disabled would not survive very well. They'd be mistreated horribly. You get one injury, you're dead. Like, modern
Right.
medicine is one of the best things ever. So, like, all of this stuff is just glorified, everything in the past. And I'm like, I mean, it's really not that great,
Right.
folks. Like, it's not.
Yeah, I agree. And to bring it back to talking specifically about the alt-right, I think
Mhm,
we actually started to touch on something about what is the root of the alt-right.
mhm,
Um, so I've noticed this a lot with members of my family that start to leave the alt-right. And as someone who used to be a Nazi,
mhm.
and I'm never gonna say that I used to be alt-right. So for any of my viewers, we're not playing those word games. Nazi is Nazi, period. Um, I and several members of my family, and I've noticed this in a lot of, the alt-right. I felt weak and afraid, and I felt like there was this constant enemy encroaching on everything. And that's what I was raised to believe is that all these other people are my enemies. And I was constantly so full of fear. And if you notice with a lot of alt-right media, that seems to be the thing. They have to constantly fearmonger, constantly keep everyone in a state of paranoia and everything. And once you take that away, they start to de-radicalize. They immediately start to question things because the brain, when bored, seeks stimulation.
Yeah.
And once you know it, there isn't an enemy hiding around every corner. And
Mhm.
so something I've noticed a lot with the alt-right, they're not these big macho men that aren't afraid of everything. They're fucking terrified of
Oh.
everything.
It's ironic because that strikes a bunch of fear into us as the queer community because we're like, "You're gonna murder us for being the way we are."
Right.
So, like, it bounces back. It's very scary how that happens. It's a cycle of hate.
It really is. Um, I remember, and in retrospect, I use this as a good example. I remember a lesbian moved into town back whenever I lived in the little alt-right community that I lived in. And so many straight guys were terrified of her and convinced that she was going to corrupt their daughters, corrupt their wives, all this other stuff. And it's like, one, don't you love your wife? Doesn't your wife love you? What is there to
Mhm,
corrupt? Like, what the fuck? And also, so what if your
mm,
daughter happens to be a lesbian? Do you think this I'm gonna do a play on your fucking outfit. Do you think this
mhm.
lesbian's just gonna come in like a fucking vampire in the night and just bite your daughter and boom, she's a lesbian? That's not how this works,
That would be very interesting. Oh my
right?
gosh.
Like, biting's fun
Uh,
and all, it doesn't make you gay.
exactly.
There's plenty of straight
Mhm.
people that like biting too.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. It's
Um,
so silly.
really is. But, like, that's something that now in retrospect, I think is really weird because I do have both a life partner and a girlfriend. And the idea of not just talking to them whenever I have
Right.
any of these fears or anything just seems absurd. And I don't understand why there's this stigma, especially in the alt-right, of men just being like, no, this is how it's going to be. This is what's going to happen. Here's reality and everything. Why can't you just sit down with your wife or whoever and just talk honestly?
Yeah, yeah, and plus, like, it's like, why are you so exactly, why are you so afraid of like, are you afraid that she's not going to want to be with you anymore or something? Or well, I mean But, like, yeah, it's very strange. It happens a lot in couples in general too, where they're like they get pissed off, and this it might be because I'm bi or something that I don't understand the mindset. Jealousy, I don't get it. Like, if my lover was like, "I wanna try something," and, like, I'd be fine, "Okay, just talk to me." Like, legit,
Right.
alls I wanna do is talk and be safe. But, like, there's this prominent attitude of, like, it just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't,
I
and that's
agree
just might be just
totally.
my mindset. But
Yeah, no, I agree totally. As a pansexual, I don't get the whole, no, we don't talk. We just yell at each other, punch holes in the wall, and then
yeah,
talk
no.
about it on Snapchat about, oh, how much I love this person who just broke my TV.
My gosh. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, so something else I noticed growing up in the alt-right, women who are married to people in the alt-right, they remind me, even if they're not being physically abused,
Mhm,
now that I work in medical field and I know the signs of mental abuse and whatnot, they remind me heavily of people that are experiencing significant psychological trauma.
mhm,
Um, and I noticed growing up that there had to be constant, like constant levels of reinforcement that yes, I totally love my husband. This is totally okay. The way I'm treated and acting is totally okay. And anytime there was any deviation by another woman in the community, she was latched onto hard. She became the leech, the demon, the enemy number one for daring to do anything differently.
yeah.
Um, why do you think it is that women that happen to be in the alt-right community, whether, willingly or as wives, girlfriends, etc., what do you think causes them to develop that kind of mindset instead of trying to get out themselves and working together?
Well, with a lot of abusive situations,
Mhm.
you are given a promise or something good, or you're born into it if
Right.
it's your parents. Um, and you're given these gifts or not gifts, but sometimes it's mental stimulation, whatever. And you can be told, "Oh, you're very pretty. Oh, like here's something really, really nice." And then you get abused.
Mhm.
And then then the person will go up to you and be nice to you again. And it causes in your mind, well, I'm just being selfish because I should like this he did this really nice thing for me. I should just stop being selfish. Yeah, okay. They yelled at me. They hit me or even if it's not physical, like mentally
Mhm.
was terrible to me, but I mean, think of all the good things that they've done. Think of all of the so your brain will latch on to the good memories, and this has
Right.
happened to me in my best friendships. Like it's a problem with parental stuff, very
Mhm.
big problem with parental stuff because the child will be raised by the parents. So then you're like, oh, am I selfish for just feeling like it's just anyway. But this is the same thing applicable to any sort of relationship
Mhm.
um where it's a lot of give and then you think that you're being selfish for like thinking anything differently
Mhm.
and yeah, so that's the cycle of abuse in that case, and it's really sad actually.
Yeah.
And you think that it can't hit you, and you're like, well, how come they can't get it out, but or get out of it, and can't why can't they see this? But then you see sometimes the same people who say that will be in a relationship in some form, doesn't have to be romantic in
Right.
the same way, and they don't even realize it. It's terrible.
I get that. And just to reiterate to anyone who happens to be watching this or anything like that, if you feel unsafe or anything, you deserve safety, you deserve compassion, you deserve all of that. So
Mhm.
once I have this put up on YouTube, please check the description. I will include resources there for groups, particularly those in the USA and UK, but also a couple international ones that can try and get you help and resources to escape, okay? Um, so I'm going to pull it back to paganism. With Trump gaining presidency back in 2016, there was a huge surge of pagan alt-right individuals.
Mhm.
And there is a shop in the city I live in that caters specifically to pagans, and it's ran by several pagan women. And they actually started having a problem with this shop because so many people started coming in that were alt-right, but seemed to honestly believe in the paganism, and it just
Mhm.
created a huge fissure in the community.
Yeah.
Um, what about paganism specifically do you think is drawing so many alt-right people so suddenly?
Well, the difference between monotheism and polytheism is in
Mhm,
polytheism with a bunch of gods, you can decide which god you want to represent you, and you can twist that god into whatever you'd like. And that's what I do with omnism in a good way.
mhm,
Um, I believe in every god and goddess has ever existed, and none of them because I believe in everything.
mhm,
So I would be a omnis with a Norse pagan center.
mhm,
And in this like I said, you can with anything that's monotheistic, you
mhm,
have a strict book, the Bible. And a lot of people will strictly follow that. There's a lot of like heavy rules. With paganism, there aren't as many rules. Like you can morph it however you please. The gods can be whatever they want to you.
mhm,
Um and while there is some strict, like, ritualistic things and, like, some people are very, like, "No, this is how this god is," etcetera, etcetera, um, like, there's just not, like, a complete solid account of absolutely everything. It's all, like, up in the air.
mhm,
They could be anything. There are these stories, but, like, with Norse paganism specifically, not much was recovered. I mean, I
mhm,
have the book by Neil Gaiman, which
right,
is really good.
and the poetic
Um
eddas
Hmm?
and the poetic eddas and stuff like
Yeah,
that,
exactly. Yep.
right,
But there's no Bible or anything like that with any of this, so you can mold it however you'd like, and that's attractive. And unfortunately, you can also mold it into something that reinforces your beliefs and your hate. And I think that that would be why someone who's alt-right rather would wander from Christianity to paganism because they can pick and choose whichever god or goddess they'd like,
mhm,
probably gods given how they are, and yeah, like, they could just turn it into whatever they want, whereas the other things are much stricter. The other monotheism is much, much stricter from my observation. I haven't read the
right,
Bible, not interested in but that's my observation.
right. As someone who has read the King James Bible front to back
Mhm,
a few times, um, I would like to move to the topic of what you said about warping it to suit your
mhm,
views. I remember whenever I first started questioning my Christianity and everything, whenever I first started being like, you know what, maybe all the things I was raised with, maybe all of that is bullshit.
mhm,
Um, and there's something that's interesting about the Bible that I think everyone should be aware of. I view the Bible as a litmus test because you can go in with any viewpoint you want and you can find passages in the Bible that promote it. You want to be a leftist, Marxist, whatever other
mhm,
stereotypes the alt right is throwing around right now, you can find stuff about that in there. I can find things that are pro transgender, pro queer, pro lesbian, pro homosexuality, pro orgy. Like, I can find everything in there. I can also find God killing a bunch of kids for a test. I can find
yeah,
anything to support anything. And
mhm,
so I don't honestly believe you can follow the Bible whatsoever without cherry picking it. And I view it as a good
exactly.
litmus test for the kind of person
Mhm,
you are. The way
yeah.
you read the Bible, the way you interpret it, the way you use it to justify things tells me a lot about yourself.
Mhm. And that's the thing, that's what's super interesting because of what I said before, it's very, very rigid, but that's how Christians view it, is it's so rigid and it's
Hmm.
got these things when really it's not. But you go to church and stuff and they'll tell you what to think.
Right.
And like I'm not putting down good Christians or, disclaimer, etc. I always have to put that disclaimer. Um, but you go to church
Hmm.
and they will tell you like how to interpret XYZ. One church is not the same as another one. And it has the illusion of being really rigid and really strict. Whereas if you look at paganism, in contrast, it looks like it's not. But then when you look at them together, it's the same thing because you can cherry pick the Bible exactly as you
Right.
said. So to them, it looks like monotheism is restrictive and strict and etc. And they want
Mhm.
something that's less restrictive to back up their beliefs even more. And they swap to this, and they
Right.
can pick and choose whatever they'd like in terms of gods. Whereas
Right.
there's a god that they see that's monotheistic is one. So,
Right. Um, so talking about cherry picking and everything, so I'm going to give a trigger warning to my audience. I'm going to be talking about some of the stuff that I was raised to believe. These are going to be some very racist, very sexist things, and one of them does involve rape. So, trigger warning. Um, so a few things that I was raised with that I'm going to use to segue into another question to further dissect the alt-right. Um, an example of some of the weird stuff I was raised with. I was taught to believe that the mark of Cain that's talked about in the Bible is actually black skin, and that means that anyone who doesn't have perfectly white skin is, to some level, inherently corrupt. I was taught that women's place is always with her man, period, and that you cannot rape a wife, period. If she is your wife, you own her body, basically. Um, and then in addition to that, there is some other really, really messed up stuff. Like, I was taught that the Earth is a cube and that we live under a dome. Not quite flat Earth, but just as crazy, right? Um,
yeah, that's really odd.
right.
That was an
So,
unexpected one. The other stuff I was like, "Yep, they're terrible," but then the cube thing, I'm like, "Alright, that's new."
right, the justification was God said to all corners of the earth, and you can't have corners if we live on a sphere or live on a flat
Oh my
circle
gosh.
or yeah. It's like, well, at that point, why
Oh,
don't we live
this
on
is
a
so stupid.
hexagon?
Yeah,
Exactly,
why is it
exactly.
a cube? Like, there's many corners.
But like that's the thing. This is stuff that isn't verbatim in the Bible. These are
Mhm,
things that are added in by people that are reading it. Like they have a belief, they read the Bible, they see something that slightly justifies their belief, and then they add on to it.
yeah,
And there are a lot of things that simply are not in the Bible. There isn't a
mhm,
passage that is like, okay, there are passages that are against homosexuality for the sake of needing children in the tribe.
mhm.
But like the whole, oh, man shouldn't lie with man, that was never meant to be men shouldn't be gay. It was contextually and the way it was written up until the 1950s was always about don't be a pedophile, you fucking freak. Period.
Oh,
That's it.
mhm.
And it's like, duh. What do you think about all these alt-right people that see the Bible, cherry pick it, but then go so far as to even add in their own stuff? Like there are churches
Mhm.
now that are adding in a new book to the Bible, like Kenneth Copeland and a few other evangelicals and televangelists.
Yeah.
They're adding in a new book to the Bible basically that's all about Trump being the second coming of Christ. And
Oh my
there
gosh.
is a church in my state of Arkansas that currently does actually teach that Trump is the second coming of Christ. And it is not
That's
a
just so
small
frustrating.
church.
People wonder why I am very negative about this country and feel like it's just getting worse, then I would probably point to that.
Right.
Um, so then that brings up my yeah, and I would actually ask society in general a question. I'm like, my
Mhm.
my question towards society would be, can you blame me for being very slightly hateful toward Christianity? Again, not good Christians, but like
Mhm.
they're all like, "Why is there war on Christianity? Why does everyone hate us? Why are you all?" And then they turn around, they say that, and then they're like, "Oh, by the way, you're a woman, so your place is under a man. You're bi, so you should die. Um, you're goth, so you're just a demon, just absolutely completely evil. I mean, look at you." Like, and
Right.
I'm like, "Oh, right, and you're polytheistic, so like you should burn." And I'm just like, "Okay, so are you really gonna question why I am suspicious and very uncomfortable around you if I find out, like, I'm like, when I hear, I'm like, okay, so are you a Christian that's going to want me to burn in hell, or are you one that's actually a good one? So,
Mhm.
like, people wonder, like, it's like, why does that chick hate Christianity so much? Not, I don't hate it so much, but like certain
Right.
people, and I'm very, like, just wary of it. Wary is the best term. And I point to that sort of thing, and I'm like, you really gonna ask that? So
Right.
exactly, like this, all of this adding and stuff, just absolutely terrible, and just reinforces that, like, maybe just like how pagans and such need to speak up a lot against this nonsense, like I
Mhm.
wanted to, and probably will continue to talk about. Maybe, the good Christians and such like that need to start, like, and there are plenty that do that, and kudos to them, like, anyone who does that, love you, like, I'm a huge fan of you. But more people need to do that, exactly that, and start, like, speaking up against that, because that's corrupting your religion, like,
Right.
you shouldn't even want that to happen, like, them adding stuff, that's, like, isn't that a sin? That sounds like a sin.
It is.
It's very sinful, and I'm like, "Okay, so you shouldn't accept that. You should be as angry as I am right now."
Yeah. That reminds me of a line. Oh, I forget which song it's from, but Penelope Scott. You should be just as pissed as I am, and I'm kind of angry that you're not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just sitting here like, you folks really shouldn't be sitting here and just nodding and being like, "Oh, they're Christians, that's okay." And I'm like, "No, it's not."
Right. I agree. I agree totally. But yeah, there's just so much dissonance between reality and what
Right.
they believe. And I actually had this conversation with my nephew the other day
Mhm.
because oh no, I'm sure every one of my viewers know I'm trans. But just in case y'all, anyone new watches this, hi, I'm a fucking transgender person. I grew up in my family being seen by many as, weirdly enough, kind of this weird masculine, like, ideal, especially by, like, the younger generation in my family. And so whenever I came out as trans, it really threw them all for a loop, right?
Mhm.
And I had this conversation with my nephew once where he was like, "Hey, I want you to know that I love you, I support you, I'm okay with you and everything, and I want to support you and all that." And we kind of started to talk, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm okay with the entire queer community, as long as they don't push it in my face and everything." And I kind of whittled him down to the point where he kind of had to admit, like, "Oh, what qualifies as pushing it in your face?" And basically, existing openly is pushing it in your face. Like, me having my trans pride flag up, me going out in public dressed in women's clothing, or going to fucking pee at Walmart is somehow forcing it on you. But at the same time, and I did this a lot growing up because I was a Nazi little shit. You know, the alt-right does, and I did push Christian ideals and all this other stuff onto other people. And it's like, we expect other people to allow us to do that because, oh, we're Christians, we're godly people, everyone else is below us. We deserve to do this. They deserve what they get because our God is the one true God. So obviously, they have to live by these ideals, not realizing that if we go by that rhetoric, every religion can basically do that.
Exactly. Yep. And that's why I am firmly against any conversion ideology. That's
Right.
why I don't really talk much about well, I talk about it when I'm asked about it,
Hmm.
but if I'm not asked about it, I don't say anything because
Right.
I'm very against converting people. Like, I hate that idea, and I don't know why it's so important to so many religions. I'm like, "This is a terrible idea."
Hmm. I agree. Um, Okay, so we've got about 20 minutes left on the stream. Are there any questions you have for me as someone who used to be a Nazi?
Um, Probably in a minute. I just wanted to add one more thing.
Okay, go for it.
It's really ironic how people really don't want things pushed in their face, where straight relationships are quite literally everywhere. Like,
Right?
Disney is a really good example of, and I'm not like, I love Disney, or some aspects of Disney. Um, and like, you have the romantic relationships currently
Hmm.
constantly there. for those in the queer community who that's basically all we ever see. So
Right.
they always say, "Oh, well, you should stop pushing it onto us," when all of their stuff is constantly everywhere. And that's not a terrible thing. There needs to obviously be more representation, but no one's saying, "Oh, we should remove all of that." We need more representation alongside that. Like that's fine,
Right.
you know?
And that's something that's really ironic is people act like, especially people in the conservative section, they act like by us being present, we're somehow taking up space.
Mhm.
You know, by queer people existing openly, there's going to be less room for straight people somehow.
Mhm.
And it doesn't make any sense. And I remember being a kid and honestly believing, like, oh, if we allow any kind of queer representation on the media or anything, that next thing you know, everything is going to be gay. And I actually did believe at one point, because this is what I was told by members of my church,
Mhm.
that if we allow more and more gay media, that eventually because I grew up being taught by my church that sex ed, whenever they teach it to you in school, is literally the teacher having sex with the students. Like, they told me that if we got more and more queer representation in the media, that I would basically go to school, and whenever it got time for sex ed, I'd have to allow a guy to have sex with me. It's like, at the time, I was terrified. Ironic that now that's, like, totally poggers, go for it. But it's just there's all this weird ideas about it shoving everyone else out when that's not how this works. A
Yeah,
queer author writing queer stuff does not prevent a straight author from writing straight stuff. I still
right.
read a ton of stuff from Dresden Files and whatnot.
Mhm.
Dresden is like peak fucking straight dude. Every other fucking book has some stereotypically hot woman that happens to also be a badass that he's fawning over and losing his mind over before getting tricked. Like,
Mhm.
it's a guilty pleasure of mine, and you can
I mean, it's pretty fun
obviously
to read. Yeah.
right, you obviously see, like, it's still there.
Mhm. And it's funny because sexuality is not a choice.
Right.
It's not. So, like, they should understand that. Like, if you're straight, you're not gonna suddenly be like, "Oh, actually," like, the only way that would happen is if you were not straight to begin with. Like,
Mhm.
I thought I was a straight woman up until a few months ago, and
Right.
then I found out I was bi. It's like, you think you just don't change your you can't change your sexuality,
Right.
honestly.
And it is a discovery process.
Right.
And that's something that, like, I've had to come to terms with because, like, I've always had the feelings of I don't wanna be a boy and all that other stuff.
Mhm.
But it wasn't until I started to openly question myself that I realized I'm pansexual and I don't care about at all the physical body of my partner. You
Mhm.
know, they could look like John Cena or they could look like the stereotypical hag from D&D 5th edition. You know, like if they
Yeah,
can consent and I like being around them, ain't nothing wrong with it, you know, as long as
that's
everyone
fair.
has fun.
Mhm.
And I think back to young me, and my mind back then, if I found out who I would become, would have just been blown. I would have been so distraught. And it really is a discovery process. And
Exactly.
that's one reason why I hate kids being raised in certain religions is they're not allowed to explore and discover themselves. That's taken
Mhm.
away from them and refused them. And I
Exactly.
feel that that is a human right to explore and get to know yourself, because how
I
else
agree.
are you supposed to live happily?
Mhm. No, I agree. That's a really good point.
So one of my viewers, Gwen, sent in, um, I mean, it does matter that a smaller proportion, i.e., anything less than 100% of it will be straight media. We do take up a certain amount of space, like, you know, any space at all. But
Mhm.
I'm okay with taking up space because we deserve a space. And
It's
you know
true.
what, Gwen? Now that you bring that up, I do
Mhm.
actually agree with that.
Yeah,
Not
I
everything needs to
agree.
be hyper straight, and
No, I
everyone
agree.
deserves a space.
Yeah, and it's not like by taking up space we're erasing them either. Like
Right,
they're thinking that it's just erasure, but there is no erasure going on.
right.
We
It's
can
like
take up space and coexist.
I actually just thought of a great example. This stream is literally an example of that. You and I are two queer people talking about stuff, but in no way, shape, or form are we somehow keeping all the other Twitch streamers that happen to be straight conservative. whatever other descriptors from
Mhm.
talking and doing their own thing.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point. I didn't think about that.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out, Gwen.
Yeah.
Okay. So, any questions you have for me as someone who used to be a Nazi?
Yeah, sure. So, what were your views of polytheistic pagans when you were
Okay. So, just a reminder, I am not a Nazi anymore. I do not hold these
Yeah.
views at all anymore. Okay.
Yeah, no worries.
Um, I am a very much very queer leftist who
Yeah.
is open to other religions. The closest religion to what I believe currently is a mix of hoodoo and a few other weird stuff. Not saying hoodoo is weird, but I also am saying it's weird, and that's why I love it. Um, and whenever I'm not in a religious mindset, I'm just an atheist. But I do love to support other religions that do help people be good people. Um, so back whenever I was a kid, what I believed, honestly, what I was taught by my church to believe and what I did hold true in my heart at the time was that if you were polyamorous, polytheistic, if you were anything other than a cishet white person following God, you were going to hell. And not only were you going to hell, but you deserved it. Um, Something that my church believed that they taught me, and this is a crazy off the wall belief,
Mhm.
was that certain people aren't actually people. And this is one of the most dangerous beliefs. I was taught that some people are literally not people, they are demons that took residence inside of a what would have been a person who would have died. So, you have human souls that God puts into some babies, and then Satan comes through and puts demon souls and liberal leftist babies.
So you would have looked at basically my style and be like, "She's a demon."
Exactly. And I
That's
honestly
kind of funny.
believed it. Like, yeah. And so growing up, like, I honestly believed that if you were queer, if you were any other religion, anything else, you were one of two groups. Either you were a demon that was corrupting other people, you knew it was all a lie, but you were trying to corrupt people, or you were too weak-willed, too little of faith, etc., and you got yourself corrupted and you needed to be brought back to the faith. And I did grow up honestly believing everyone internally and instinctually knew God was real, was the true God, etc. And I am talking about the Christian God
Right.
because, that's what I was taught to believe, that everyone is born knowing that God is real, the true God, and stuff like that. Of
Yeah.
course, it's all bullshit.
Yeah. I might say something a little controversial here, so
Go for it.
but I feel like people who believe that and, like, bow down and, like, let God rule their lives, I don't understand it, and I feel like they're the weak-willed ones.
Hmm.
Again, no offense meant. But I personally don't understand the mindset of, "We need to obey strictly this God, and
Hmm.
they are our savior, and they have to be all of it." Like, that sounds like an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
To me, it sounds like an abusive relationship. I'm sorry for those who have those beliefs and who are angry at me right now, but, like, it just I don't understand why you would want someone, like, cracking a whip over you all the time and being like, "If you deviate, you're gonna burn completely." Like, it doesn't keep you good, it keeps you scared. You should be doing things to be good and to be a good person, not because you're afraid of going to hell, and that's one of my little, like, gripes I have about it. Like, I'm just like, I don't get it. I don't know why you would
Hmm.
want this quote unquote father figure cracking a whip and trying to demand that you follow everything. And it seems like evidently they're perfect. He's a
Hmm.
perfect God, and yet he has to have this undying devotion, and like a lot of people have to bow down and be constantly like worshiping them. Why? Like, if you're so perfect,
Now,
why do you
see,
have to demand your followers?
I have answers for that as someone who used to be in that.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'm curious. Yeah, that's a
Okay,
good
okay,
question.
okay. So, what I was taught to believe, anytime I had any question like that, like, oh, this seems abusive, or oh, this seems bad, or anything like that,
Hmm.
um, what I believed and what was taught to me was that God is perfect, that it's not my place to question him and his decisions because I am so imperfect and can't even begin to comprehend it.
But
And
wait, that's
so
a bit of a paradox,
it
isn't it?
is exactly. But see, the way I was told to treat it is keep faith, hold faith in my heart, and then once I die and go to heaven, then I can ask him personally and have it all explained to me and laid out to me, which is of course complete
Oh my
bullshit,
gosh.
right? Um
Yeah.
and then in addition to that, like everything was just treated like I was some and this was not just me. If you were an
Mm,
adult and you did this too, you would be treated this way.
yeah.
Um if you asked questions or anything, you were treated like you were stupid, corrupt, etc. It was seen as like, oh, you're too unfaithful to get it. Oh, you don't know yet because God hasn't spoken to you and told you directly yet. It was treated like it was a you problem, not a God problem. It was constant gaslighting. And in addition to that, it
Yeah.
was constant fear. I lived my life in terror whenever
Mhm.
I lived that way. Like, I remember once I had a gay thought because I saw this new kid at school and I thought, damn, he's kind of hot.
Mhm.
I went home and I cried. I cried for
Mhm.
hours. I thought I was going to go to hell. I prayed and prayed and prayed for repentance. And in my head, I felt like, "Oh, God's not forgiving me," all this other stuff because, like and it was basically an illusion, like a hallucination.
Hmm.
I would, in my head, hear my own voice talk back to me in calming
Uh-huh.
ways, and I attributed that to God. And
Right.
so by not having that calming voice in my head telling me, "Oh, it's okay," and all this other stuff, I was like, "Oh god, I fucked up so bad by thinking this boy is cute. I'm going to hell and I'm gonna be tortured for all eternity.
Mm.
Oh, woe is me."
Yeah, this
And
is
it's
why I'm
like,
skeptical of those people who are like, "Oh, I died and went to heaven, by the way, and here's my visions." I'm like, "That's all in your head."
right? Um, but yeah, no, like there was constant terror.
Yeah.
And that's what kept me in line was this constant terror, and I would reinforce it actively. If I ever did anything even slightly wrong, I would immediately start praying. I would literally on the bus to school would sing like church songs and I would
Mhm.
pray on the bus
Yeah.
loudly. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, there was a
Yeah, it's
lot
the
of stuff like
definition of
that.
an abusive relationship, just
Yeah.
using religion, so I'm just like, I don't get it. I don't.
I don't either,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's how it works. It is constant reinforcement that God
Mhm.
isn't the one in the wrong, you are, and it is
Mhm.
constant fear. And I think that's another reason why we can find so many of these people in the evangelical community that
Mhm.
are fascist, that are neo-Nazi, that are because they're already used to this.
Yeah.
I don't believe you can really be alt right unless you're terrified.
Yeah.
Because as
That's fair.
soon as I started feeling safe, I started questioning things and I stopped being all
Yeah.
right. And there are several members in my server, Tran, who used to be alt right and then
Mhm.
found a place that was just safe to be them. And wouldn't
Okay.
you know it, once they had a safe place without judgment where they could actually ask questions without
Mhm.
being looked down upon, they just slowly de-radicalized themselves. And I'm even
That's really
talking to one
fascinating.
guy on Reddit who was
Mhm.
really transphobic. He was
Mhm.
sending me death threats and rape threats and stuff. And
Mhm.
he started to message me privately trying to harass me. And I just didn't really respond except to
Mhm.
like let him ask questions like, "Oh, you honestly believe that? Do you want to talk about it?" And he did start asking questions and I started giving him actual answers and we've been talking for like a
Uh-huh.
week and he is way calmer now and he's actually
Oh.
like starting to question shit and is like, "I've noticed some things with this in my kid."
Mhm.
And he asked me, "Do you think it would be better for me to talk to like someone at my church for this or do you think it would be okay if I just take my kid to therapy?" And I'm
Mhm.
like, "Dude, go with the therapist. Trust the therapist. Fuck
Therapist.
yeah."
Yeah.
Like just giving people a
That's
safe place achieves
that's
so
really
fucking
cool.
much.
That's good. I didn't even like, it didn't come across my mind for that because, like, I get very angry
Mhm.
easily, and I'm like, "But maybe just being open to talking is a good idea."
There's this one guy that's famous. He's a black man and he collects
Oh,
KKK
yeah,
hoodies
I
and stuff
remember.
like that.
I
And
remember. I love that story.
that's his thing is
Mhm.
he'll just go to these people and he'll just bring them food and chat with them and all this other stuff, which not only forces them to challenge like, oh, I thought they were, oh, I thought all the black people and everything were all brutes and evil and stuff like that. It makes them question not
Right,
only that, but it also makes them question everything else about their religion. Like, could all of this
right.
be a lie? But then in
Exactly.
addition to that, he provides them a space like, hey, I'm a black dude. Ask your questions. Ask me
Uh-huh.
anything. I'm not gonna hate you for it. Go for it.
Okay.
And they
That's
do.
interesting. Mhm.
And next thing you know, they're like, yeah, I don't want this anymore. I'm ashamed of this. Take it.
Oh, okay. I get that. That's really interesting.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I like the really good stories of those who do change. Now, what about those who are so rigid? What do you think about those who are so rigid that they do not do that and they don't change? They don't take that space.
Now, see, I want to bring up someone recently that
Mhm.
turns out to have my back and support me who I never thought I would. I'm not going to mention them by name or anything.
Okay.
Because my family does watch my streams occasionally and they do
Mhm.
harass me over what I talk about. So, hi
Okay.
mom. Um uh so yeah. Um this person very alt-right,
Mhm.
diehard Trump supporter, you know, very much the queers need to be drug out and shot, all of this stuff, right?
Mhm.
Now, he recently started talking to me again out of nowhere,
Okay.
and I didn't want anything to do with him. I refused to talk to him until he sent me a message like, "Hey, I just want you to know that you can be you, and I'm sorry for judging you, and I want to fix this." And
Okay.
so I started
Hmm.
talking to him about what changed.
Okay.
What had happened was he had raised his family very religiously, very, rigidly alt-right, everything.
Right.
And one day he goes to his daughter's room and he finds her
Mhm.
diary and he starts to read it, which of course, big no-no there.
Yeah. Mm-mm.
But the thing
But
is in her diary, he sees that she's written stuff about questioning her gender and sexuality and
yeah.
how he would never accept her, the family would never accept her, stuff like that.
Mhm. Mm.
And she was plotting suicide. And
Mm.
that hit him hard.
Yeah.
And he started to
As it should.
question, right. And he started to question like, "Oh shit, what am I really doing?"
Mhm.
And he actually did sit down, and I'm so grateful for this. I'm grateful
Mhm.
for his daughter's sake that he did this. He actually started to think, would taking her to church and letting the pastor talk to her be the best choice? Because I don't think it would be if
Mhm.
this is what it's doing. And
Right.
he made the decision that he would rather have a living, happy daughter or
Right.
child
Mhm.
than a cishet dead child.
Right.
And
That's a Mhm.
I'm so grateful he made that decision. And so
Mhm.
he started talking to her about it and he was like, "Hey, I just want you to know I found your diary. I read it. I know I shouldn't have.
Yeah.
I love you. You can question your gender and sexuality." And that
Mhm.
was actually part of why he reached out to me was he had spent this time hating me for being trans.
Right.
And now he's reaching out to me to get advice on how to talk to his daughter and how to come to accept her. And like,
Mhm.
oh, if she starts questioning her gender, how do I approach this? What do
Mhm.
I do? What if she needs HRT? And now he's gonna go to Pride with me next year.
Oh my gosh, that's such a wonderful
Right.
story. I love this is yeah.
And I saw them the other day, and it's so great because
Mhm.
I saw her leaving the house to go to a friend's house, and she has her backpack, and she likes collecting pins.
Mhm.
And I saw on there that she had a bisexual pride pin.
Oh.
And, like, I say hi to her, and she's like, "Hi," and then she points it out to me, and she says, "Yeah, my dad bought this for me as a present."
Oh my gosh, that's
She
such a
didn't
good
pick
s
it out.
yeah.
He did the research to find out what flag it was and then
Mhm.
went and bought one for her.
Mhm.
I think for the people that are so rigid, I think they need a slap in the face kind of wake up
Yeah,
call. I think
that's
that's the
true.
only thing that's gonna work, because that's the only thing that worked for me. I was very rigid. I was very yeah. Um,
Mhm,
what ended up being my wake up call was some stuff happened. I got taken from my family and put into a mental health home. And
mhm,
while there, I didn't have that constant reinforcement from the church, constant reinforcement from the rest of my family, and I started to de radicalize, especially because there were a whole bunch of other people in the mental health home, including queer kids, non white
mhm.
kids, non Christian kids. Um, and being in the alt right, that is what we do. We create safe spaces for ourselves so that we don't have to question our beliefs, right?
Mhm.
And it's stupid, you know?
Yeah,
You want to knock us out of that? Good. Do it. Get us out of that safe space. But don't do it in a way that's going to make us become violent. Because I can tell you right now, if you drag someone out of it, they're going to be violent.
yeah, they're gonna be violent, yep. Yeah,
Um,
so it's a debacle, it's something hard
right,
to to figure out because I don't myself, I don't know either. I'm like,
right. And that's something that I
it's all
think is honestly terrifying for the alt right is getting more representation of anyone else, humanizing them, letting them have their
oh,
space. That's
mhm.
dangerous because then it's going to lead to people questioning.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
that's clearly like you can look there, you can correlate the data between representation in the media of queer groups and stuff like that
Mhm,
increasing. It's a direct correlation to the decline in the amount of people going to church and being very, very strictly evangelical.
mhm.
Like it's a nearly one for one correlation.
Yeah, and they'll see that as obviously a challenge to their
Right,
religion and such like that, and it's like, that's not the case. Maybe you need to
right,
start accepting that there are flaws in your beliefs.
exactly. But for some people, there's not much you can do.
Yeah, there's not much, yeah.
I'm having to come to terms with the fact that I'm just gonna have to start cutting some people in my family away from me.
Yeah,
I came out to my grandparents
mhm,
and my grandpa. It was a good visit. They were nice to me, respectful and everything, like, "Oh, we wanna
mhm,
see you more. We're so happy that you're doing well," stuff like that.
mhm.
But then my grandpa also made the statement that the fact that I'm living transgender, the fact that I'm doing what I'm doing and everything, especially the fact that I'm running Tran and trying to create a safe space for queer teens, young adults, and people that are entering like real adulthood, the fact that I'm doing all of this is so shameful that he said to me that it might be better for me to kill myself than to continue living this life. That would bring
Gosh.
less shame to me. It would prevent me from sinning more. It would look better in God's eyes that I chose to end the sin than to yeah, yeah.
That is absolutely terrible. So, yeah, I can tell that's someone that it's probably better to cut out of your life as soon as possible. Well, that sounds very dangerous, actually. Almost like a threat.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah,
Oh,
to
I'm
those of
sorry to hear that.
you hey, it's okay. To those of you that
Mhm,
are watching that are thinking about coming out, please focus on your own safety. I
mhm,
promise you, there are always going to be people out there that are willing to love you honestly for who you are. My family, I haven't really been a part of for going on 10 years now. It's only this year, 2021, that I've started reconnecting with my family. I spoke to
mhm.
my brother for the first time in 7 years, stuff like that. And he is actually supportive. Times change, but you can't get back time that you've lost.
Right.
Focus on you. Abby, the other members of my actual family, none of them are blood related to me, but I would die for every single one of them because they are worth that. They love me honestly and truly, and I love them honestly and truly. And you deserve actual love and compassion. Please don't waste your time, and please, please, please don't give up. I promise you it gets better. Okay.
I agree.
Well, Des, thank
Mhm.
you for coming onto my stream. Do you have any
No problem.
closing statements you'd like to make?
Nope, I'm very honored to have been here. We had some really, really insightful and good discussions. I learned a lot myself.
Mm-hmm.
to be a bit more open-minded to people being able to change because I had the rigid, "These people are terrible, they're not gonna change," but you're an example of someone who did change, and you've told me stories of others, so I really appreciate this perspective as well, and, like I said, I'm really, really happy that I was able to join you here today, and, thank you so much.
No problem.
And, yeah.
Um, Great. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming on. So for those of you that are still watching the stream, this has been Decim Aster. She's fucking amazing. I'm reading the
Oh,
book
thank
Red
you.
Viper right now. Once I'm done reading this book, I am actually going to give away a copy of it to one of my
Oh,
viewers
that's
on
so nice of
stream,
you.
and I am going to be doing a review of it. So please check that out. Des, I'm going to be plugging all of your socials after this into my server as well as into the YouTube description once I get this uploaded, if you're
Okay, I
comfortable with that.
appreciate that. Yes, of course, I'm comfortable. Mhm.
So, to everyone watching, please check her out. She's awesome. She and I have been talking on and off for like a week
Mhm.
now. I can't support her more than I already am, so I would love for
I
y'all
really
to try and
appreciate
give her
all of
some
that.
support. Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Please make sure to eat and drink. I love you. You're fucking awesome. Have a good rest of your day.